For more than 20 years, the annual fashion show was the pinnacle event awaiting fashion design students near the end of their 4-year voyage at the university. The long-standing high-profile event showcased students' works, whether the name on their soon-to-come diploma read Textile, Philly U, or Thomas Jefferson University. When the class of 2020 embarked upon their senior years, they eagerly anticipated that night in May, like the alumni who came before them. But then along came COVID-19 and a pandemic that would soon turn the world askew early in their spring semester. Flash forward to the academic year 2020 into 2021, after a summer that saw the arrival of Faraz Samui to the university as director of the fashion design program. Brainstorming ideas that would create a new normal with quickness led to a concept that not only mirrors industry trends, but revolutionized an educational approach in fashion schools locally and nationally to keep ahead of the proverbial curve. After months of hard work, the program's first ever fashion design film premiered in May 2021. The film highlighted their inspirations, thought processes, motivations, and dreams, but it was about more than showcasing the fashion creations of students. It also extended appreciation to faculty members who are the driving force behind the work seen in the film, as well as the students' loved ones who served as integral support networks during those challenging times. Widely hailed as a success despite its virtual-only presentation, the fashion design film has returned this year. I'm Brian Hickey, a member of the university's communications team. For this episode of the university's Nexus Podcast, some of the players involved in this unique event speak about the processes that will culminate with the film premiering during an in-person event at Downs Hall on May 7th. In advance of that milestone, Professor Samui explains how the move from fashion show to film blazed a new educational path that other programs have followed. It's also served to prepare students for the future of work in their industry. Several students also break down what it means to them to have their work captured digitally for the world to see going into the future. And finally, Dean Mike Leonard, who has been at the university for the vast majority of fashion shows, puts it all into historical context. Let's pull up a chair on the digital runway with Professor Samui, who sets the stage with a pandemic that forced everybody to think and behave differently. Sure, it was a shock to the system at first, but people quickly realized not only how the shift was keeping with industry trends, but they also saw the ways in which it could benefit them as they embark on careers after commencement. So what exactly inspired this change?
For us in our program, we wanted to say, how can we still showcase our students' work without people really being physically there? And the next best thing was doing it digitally, doing a fashion film to really show not even just the end product of our students' work, but showing our audience and people that love fashion the importance of the process of designing. Part of the learning experience that we really built at Jefferson is, how did you come up with that idea? What was your inspiration? And how did you come from this image in your mind to making a physical garment? When you watch this film, you're going to see that entire process of our students' work.
Was that not possible with fashion shows? And not just Jefferson Fashion Show, but fashion shows in general? Was that always just about the runway and who's sitting front row?
Fashion shows in general, since the beginning of time, when the whole concept of showcasing work, it was always about the end product. Because the goal is you're showing a product to your consumer, to the person that's going to buy it. And I think now, because we're an economy and a society of content and wanting to know the story and wanting to know more, we felt that it was valuable to give people the behind the scenes, a deeper dive, a closer look into all the collaborations and the work that our students put together. What's happening in the industry right now is exactly what we're doing here in Jefferson. We're very parallel to what we're doing. And we want our students to know that whatever you're learning here is actually happening in the industry. So there's no surprises. They're really doing what our professional fashion designers are doing today.
Mirroring the industry with an eye toward being on the cutting edge has long been a calling card of the fashion program. Mike Leonard is the Dean of the School of Design and Engineering in the Canbar College of Design, Engineering, and Commerce. Another entry on his CV could theoretically read University's Fashion Show Historian, as he started here shortly after it did. We asked Dean Leonard to share that history and how it's led to this moment of transition.
I've been here for 22, going on 23 years. The fashion show predates me by a few years. Originally, it was one of those events that the fashion design program put on in the old Bucky Harris Gymnasium. And it was a spectacular affair because of the quality and caliber of the students' work. The fashion show that took place in what was a very small gymnasium at the time grew to a very celebrated, one of the older instructors who has since retired called it the hot ticket. It was the hot ticket in the spring.
The show quickly outgrew that tiny gym and moved to the Academy of Music and ultimately to Sherman Mills in East Falls. Dean Leonard noted the kismet of the show finding its way to renovated textile mills not too far from campus. There was also a mission behind the glitter.
When I became dean, my greatest hope was that we no longer had the stage show mentality for this, that the work that the students themselves, that the work they did with the faculty was very much what I think has been called New York quality. And so the idea was, is there some way we could put together a New York quality fashion show? And boy, did we. The venue was beautiful. The stage that was created and the way it was run, you would have thought you were in New York or Paris or Milan watching the work go down the runway. It was in the appropriate setting. People really enjoyed it. The nice thing about it is it was occurring in this sort of New York design mode while our students themselves were actually presenting their work in New York as part of Design Week. And so the students got sort of a double dose of what this was like. Just a wonderful development in the program.
In other words, it set Jefferson students apart from the proverbial pack.
One of the things that I'm most proud of is that we reflected all of that. Any opportunity to show the world that our students really go quite beyond what you should expect of a bunch of students doing their homework, as it were, or getting their portfolios ready. No. These are committed fashion designers who are looking to make kind of a dent in the universe and strutting their stuff here and in New York.
While the scene was splendid, Dean Leonard and others had already been brainstorming ways to evolve the program even before COVID forced their hands.
Not a year and a half before that, started talking about the fact that fashion shows are expensive to put on. Fashion shows are not as well attended, perhaps, in places like New York, London, Paris, as they were at one time. The industry shifted around to how they handle the shows. The shows in some cases got smaller, more boutique. What designers were doing is going direct to buyers, or designers were going direct to a very specific part of their audience. So we had already started thinking, what could we do that would prep the students for that? It seemed entirely appropriate that as a school, we should try to figure out how do you do that and lead the way in doing it. COVID gave us the perfect reason to want to bite the bullet and do it. At the time, our new program director, Farai Samoyed, had just come on. We just said, this is what we would like to do. And nobody had to finish their sentences. It was just, let's roll up our sleeves and figure out how to do this.
That is when the effort went into hyperdrive, with the mission of creating a fashion film that takes the students' work beyond a 15-second spin down the runway into capturing the designer's backstory and their inspirations and their creative processes.
And now I would be happy to say there's no looking back. That's the way we do this. And in the future, it gives us the ability to do the one thing we always wanted. Yes, it's a beautiful gown. Yes, it's a lovely creation. Yes. That's all great. We have the designer that designed that, who can unpack for you what influenced them, what development, what of their craft and their creativity did they bring to bear? What research did they do? How are they worried about sustainability? How are they worried about diversity? All of that, rather than just applaud at a beautiful look. Yes, do that, but understand that designer is going to be the future of what this industry is like. And that's the part of the fashion design movie that excites me the most.
Professor Samoyi couldn't agree with that assessment more. She offers context to the mad dash that resulted in the first edition of the fashion film, which debuted in May 2021.
The industry has this bubble effect, right? We've been sort of building up this volcano, and the volcano has really erupted because people want to know more about the brands that they support. If I'm going to have my hard-earned money and I'm going to buy something from you, convince me to buy it. I think we are a culture of overspending and overbuying, but I think our consumers today are trying to be more purposeful about what they buy and what they shop. So I believe the volcano was there, but the pandemic really erupted it, and it really made us want to focus on transparency in the fashion design process. Sometimes whenever you are put in that position, that's when you have to do power moves. And that's when you put out your best work. I always say, like, I'm good under pressure. You know, it's like that pressure cooker that pops open. And I think that's where we were. But in having conversations and everybody really being on the same page of let's do something and let's do it right is really how we collectively came up with the idea to put this together. And of course, it helps having someone like Dean Mike Leonard that comes up with great ideas and then is also supportive of these ideas as well.
Having great ideas is one thing. Getting buy-in, though, is a separate effort, as Dean Leonard learned. Was it a difficult sell for students to have that huge transition from runway show to film?
I will always say our students are terrific. Jefferson School of Design and Engineering students, Jefferson Fashion Design students never disappoint. When we presented to them what we were planning to do and how this would work, the fact that it would be easily transported digital assets that they could use as they needed to, they got that right away. Of course, they're working in that world and they see all of that stuff directly. Pretty much it was, how do we explain this to our parents who expected to be in a seat and clap ferociously as the gowns came by or the dresses or the collections came by? But that only lasted for a few minutes. Here finally is a tool that can help you explain how you are ready to do things in the future, how you are capable, how you are prepared. It delivers your confidence.
In this year's film, which everyone involved says is markedly different than its predecessor, Danny Feeney and Michaela are among the fashion design majors featured. They're both from New Jersey, and when faced with the loss of the fashion show, both say they quickly realized the benefits that the fashion film provides, most notably in their search for future jobs. Let's first hear from Danny, who was drawn to Jefferson because of its, in his words, warmer, open environment. It was a toss-up when he had to choose between architecture and fashion design for a major.
Well, it's funny. I flipped a coin, and that's how I decided which major I was going to choose. I was very interested in architecture. I was very interested in interior design, and I was also very interested in fashion design. And I said, I have to choose one. Architecture was the first one out because a 5-year program wasn't exactly my speed either. So I went with fashion design because it's just something I'm very passionate about.
What was it like at the start, since it was the coin flip type of situation? Did you mesh with it instantly, or did it take some time?
It was a mix between growing pains and feeling welcome. I generally adjust to things very quickly. So I think coming here to this program, there were some things that I needed to work on and hone in. You can really start from the ground up here, which is something that I really did appreciate about it.
So the pandemic arrives your sophomore spring?
Yep, end of sophomore year.
How did that impact you?
Not as roughly, I think, as some of our incoming students, because in those first 2 years, you really do learn all your baseline skills. We had learned basically everything that you needed to know to get you along for the most part. It was still very difficult, especially because my major is such a hands-on major in terms of learning how to do things correctly, in terms of fittings and having in-person fittings. So you can really see the differences between a body and a dress form. You know, it's one has arms, one doesn't. We were very lucky in terms of our professors, because a lot of them did work very hard answering emails, texts at whatever hour of night we were, working on our stuff. They generally were really helpful in terms of getting us along and making sure that we had learned all the skills that we needed to.
When you came here, the fashion show was the light at the end of the tunnel. But now, because of just the way the world is shaken out, that's not possible anymore. Were you bummed that there's no show, or did you view the fashion film as having the potential for your work to live forever, as opposed to a fashion show that's over after a night?
I won't lie, it was a letdown because, I came here when I was a senior in high school, and that was basically the ticket to me coming here. I was saying, I'm watching students who produce their work walking out on stage. This is like amazing. This is a glittering beacon. I think you know what? Things change. Life is different. A fashion show 50 years ago is nothing like a fashion show today. Fashion show 10 years ago, 20 years ago is nothing like it is today. As much as we all would love to see what our stuff would have been like in that atmosphere, it's important for us to acknowledge that things are going to change and we need to really adjust to it. With the fashion industry, it is such a changing industry. We're constantly doing new work. Having a fashion film over having a fashion show definitely has its upsides, it has its downsides. It may not have that same appeal because you have to do such an amount of work for it ahead of time. And then you get that one night where you get to feel like a star. At the same time, now we can relive that moment. We can see it on film in a really, really nicely produced way. It's kind of like a comparison between like live theater and movies. They're two very separate entities. Obviously, they're basically the same thing, but there's just a lot more production value to one versus the other. We can create even more of a magical kind of idea with this film.
Michaela Day found her way to Jefferson from Brick, New Jersey. She was steered in this direction by a vocational school teacher who was also an alumnus. Michaela discusses the benefits of the transition from fashion show to fashion film.
We were known for having like the largest student-run fashion show for a very long time. And transitioning to a film, I remember a lot of people were skeptical about it last year. Just to get like an idea of what I was in for, I watched it last year and I'm like, wow, this is like really amazing, because in the fashion show, you didn't talk to the designers. You maybe not even know what they look like. And you only looked at their work for a fleeting moment. Like it would be walking the stage for 15 seconds. And that was it. That was your moment. But in the film, they get a full video clip of them talking about the collection and getting these really cool detail shots that you can't get from a catwalk, like, because they don't stop. They just keep walking. I'm really happy that we are doing a film. And I really think that's where the future of fashion is heading, because of the storytelling element of it and being able to show things that the viewer wouldn't be able to see in a fashion show.
Though Michaela has already landed a job creating children's wear in New York City starting after commencement, she appreciates the leg up that the film gives her fellow fashion majors as they enter their professional lives.
I really believe that it makes us more marketable when we're trying to sell it to employers. A lot of our professors here are also alumni. I was talking to one, she said, well, when I had to present to employers, I had to tell them, go to 15 minutes and 37 seconds, and then you can see my collection for 10 seconds. And now they're like, we are going to email you your personal video clip that's going to be around 5 minutes long that we can put on our portfolio website of us talking about our collection and showing it in a very aesthetically pleasing way, because we got a professional crew to do it. So making those like distinctions and making those employers have that personal connection with us, as opposed to a fashion show, which really separates the designer, I feel like we all stand a better chance in the job market.
That last line is music to faculty members' ears, as it captures the essence of why they do what they do, be that in relation to the fashion film or in course after course, year after year. In this case, it boils down to one specific question for Professor Samui. How is this fashion film process preparing students for the future of work in their industry?
When you become a designer in the industry, you're always going to be asked to explain your design process. It's like that 30-second elevator pitch that business students have. How did you come up with that idea, and what does that idea mean, and how is it going to convey? Because at the end of the day, when you're a designer, it's all about numbers at the end, right? It's like you're creating a product for somebody to buy into. Being a part of this film is really preparing our students to understand how to have their 30-second elevator pitch in fashion, to be able to share with employers to get jobs, and then also share with consumers that will buy into their work.
We asked Danny how that parlayed into his experiences.
Fashion is a very changing industry, and you need to be able to change on a dime. I think it's put us in a mindset that not everything is going to go how you pictured it 4 years ago. When I think about myself 4 years ago and what I wanted to produce at the end of my college career, it was very different from what I'm doing right now. Even the direction that I want to go in the future is still very different, and it's probably going to change. Nothing is really stable, which is definitely scary, but for the job market in the future, we just need to know that things are going to change. Things are always moving and evolving. So it's definitely helped us in that way.
Over the past 2 years, Jefferson's graduating seniors have actually been the trailblazers in a fashion film trend. We asked Professor Samoyi to put that into context. Are other schools doing this?
So last year, we were one of the few schools that did it. And I really do believe some of the schools saw what we did and they were so impressed. So now, yes, it's becoming a norm. I don't want to, brag or anything, but I will say that a lot of schools did see what we did and they're following suit.
What will this year's event look like?
Ooh, this year's event is going to be special. It's going to be unique. It's going to be emotional because you're seeing these senior students that basically in their freshman, sophomore year were in a pandemic. They've been given so many different challenges of how do I design on Zoom? How do I communicate with my professors and my peers over Zoom? In their final year, they actually get to be with each other. That is probably one of the most beautiful things you will ever see and I will ever see. And I just can't wait for all of you to see it because you're going to see how these students evolved from such a hard and difficult challenge into something so amazing and so beautiful. We have a lot of students that come into our program that are unsure about what they want to do in fashion or in their career. And what's really special about our program is that we're really here to nurture our students to become the best creative or best designer that they can be. And so what you'll see with this film is that many of these students came into our program, didn't know what genre of fashion they wanted to be in, didn't know if they wanted to do menswear or adaptive wear or sustainability. And then you see them in this moment and they're so sure about their work, right? And they're so proud of it. For any student out there that wants to experience what Jefferson is all about and wants to take a chance on themselves, this is definitely the place to be.
While Danny's collection in the film focuses on old Hollywood, both the glamour and the dark side of it, Michaela explains that she took a more introspective look at her own work over the years at Jefferson. That lent itself to an introspective look at the fashion film experience.
Sometimes it was stressful, oh my gosh, I really want this in the film, so I have to get that done first. A lot of people, including myself, adjusted our plan of what order we're going to do things in, depending on okay, I want this look in the film because I feel like this represents my collection very well. With those adjustments came a little bit of stress of okay, now we got to reconfigure this and put this over there. But once we walked into the filming, definitely this past semester, they asked us for songs we would want to play in the background. When I walked in, they were playing music that I would typically listen to. And they're yeah, we're just trying to get the vibe going of what your collection is. And they had a lot of creative direction based off of what I told them my collection was. They had some other ideas for how to present it. And I was wow, that, yeah, my idea is cool, sure. And pretty much when I got out of the film, I'm yeah, this is happening, this is going to be great. Learning about myself a little bit more through the process is kind of what my entire collection's about.
This wasn't a solitary experience for the students. It actually served to bring them together and steep them in curiosity as to how their peers were handling their segments.
It was really enjoyable to talk to other people and see what did they do for your clip, because everyone has their own different intro. I didn't tell any of my friends. I'm no, it's going to be cool, so I'm not going to tell you guys what I'm doing for the intro. You're just going to need to go to the film. It was very cool to see everybody's own individual take. We all had the same senior thesis. How did you take that idea and turn it into something that's your own? Everybody's clip is very much their own, so it made everyone feel this is mine. As opposed to the fashion show, it's kind of this is Jefferson as a whole, which this still is, but it gave you more of a personal connection. People could talk about it. Just more, I guess, heart to it than just watch someone walk in and walk out.
For Dean Leonard, the film is all about focusing on what's most important in the educational process, designing, which is what the students are getting hired for upon commencement, not just what one of their creations looked like on a runway for a couple of split seconds.
We tell some of our design students, the designing is what you get paid for. The designing is what you have worked so hard on. So the fashion design film does that. It delivers that in a package. For people going up into the industry right now, that's a critical element, right? Supply chains have been broken, cultural norms are getting shifted, economies are moving all over the place. I can think of no better way than to enter that, than to make sure your voice is being heard in support of what you did in your work. Your voice is being heard in what your outlook is, as well as, my God, you're a good designer. That's the part of it that I think comes with this that you wouldn't have gotten before. The up and coming students, people who are considering design, the message that we have for those folks is, we get it. We're here to support you, but we have every confidence that you can move forward. You're going to go places and do things. And to anybody considering this industry and these disciplines, getting involved in design, now's the perfect time to jump in.
So yes, the fashion film is firmly established as the go-to huge end-of-the-year moment for the fashion design program. But what about the future?
What we're seeing in the industry now is that fashion shows and fashion films are going to be presented to us in a hybrid way, where you will have elements of film showcasing the process. Then you may have models walking down the runway to show you the final garment. So we're really looking forward to seeing this mishmash, mixed match, hybrid situation of how fashion is going to grow and evolve in the future.
To learn more about this and other Jefferson stories, please visit jefferson.edu/The Nexus. Today's interviews were conducted by Brian Hickey with production support from Dan Bernstein. Thank you for listening.